Hi there. Welcome to The Preventable, the podcast giving you a seat at the table with conversations about the intersection of alcohol, drugs, and mental health in everyday lives. Take a seat and join us.
Welcome to The Preventable. With me today is Professor of Communications at SIUE, Min Liu. She is also the faculty advisor of the Asian American Civic Scholars. Welcome to The Preventable.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you for having me.
You and I, okay, first of all, I had to say, okay, we should probably start recording because I feel like we have so much to talk about. Mm-hmm. We've been introduced via email and we run in very similar circles. You're on our community advisory board and we work pretty closely in that capacity and some others, but we've never actually gotten to meet before today. So I'm really grateful that you're here with us and we can dive in. So thank you.
No, it's a really exciting opportunity as well. And I also want to just plug in and say how I appreciate all the opportunities and connections I've been able to make and opportunities I've been able to kind of tap into thanks to the Prevent+Ed organization. So,
well, we are, it's one of those things. We were talking about this a little bit before we started rolling. You don't know what you don't know. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so Professor of Communication. So how long have you been doing this work? How long have you been in St. Louis? Did you grow up here?
Yeah.
Tell me your origin story.
So my origin story is that, 2007, that's when I moved to St. Louis and freshly out of graduate school and started my job at SIUE, and I decided to live in St. Louis because we wanted to raise our children in a city like St. Louis where you could get good grocery stores and, have nice museums and culture centers to visit. As I continued on with my professional career, I became more and more aware of the need to be involved in my community, and that included the Chinese American community and the Asian American community. I think fast forward to maybe, let's say, start of the pandemic and, looking at the Atlanta shooting, that's when my identity as a community member took on more of a role as an activist. And I think of activist as, I used to think of activist as someone who has a lot of almost, not anger, but, there's a lot of intense energy and emotions. But since then, I've realized that to be an activist, it's a long run. You need to have continuous.
It's a marathon.
It's a marathon.
A
yeah, you cannot just depend on that, So, but definitely Atlanta shooting and, the COVID-19 and the anti-Asian hate kind of led me personally to realize that we need to invest in our community's youth and the most vulnerable, and to address those issues that are oftentimes deeply rooted in community level challenges, and that includes mental health for our young population.
So you just said a whole lot. So I'm going to backtrack just a smidge.
Yeah.
So let's say that I'm a person living in St. Louis that hears the news and I'm watching things happening in big cities, right? Mm-hmm. Like San Francisco and New York City, and I'm seeing anti-Asian hate crimes happening, and I'm thinking, oh, those are happening in those cities. But they're not happening in my backyard. Talk to me about that. So is there that sentiment, that hate present here in St. Louis, particularly around COVID and why is it not being covered more? So those are two questions. So Is it happening? I know the answer is yes. Mm-hmm. And why is it not being covered more?
So going back to, the start of the national conversations about anti-Asian hate, my youth group, thank you for introducing us earlier, the Asian American Civic Scholars, decided that we wanted to actually look at this as a localized issue. We understand that the Chinese American community experience for the youth here in St. Louis, in a Midwest city, would be very different from the youth experience in San Francisco or New York City. So we wanted to know how it's experienced here locally. And the students collected their own data using Google form, which, the data that we got back was astounding. I remember vividly reading one. We had both quantitative and qualitative data, and one of our student who responded by saying that their parents run a community, a restaurant, and they've always done business in the community. And one day a regular came over to pick up a takeout and just decided to say to the student's mom, "Are you from China?" "Yes." And then she's saying, "Then how can you be smiling so much if your people brought this to St. Louis or brought this to America?" And there are many other student input that we collected that showed the problem of, things that are happening in the hallway, things that are happening to kids when they're walking home to school, being called a variety of racial slurs on the school bus and of course on social media as well. And I got to know a couple of parents whose younger kids became afraid of the safety of their parents, because they saw online those videos of elderlies being attacked viciously for no good reason. So yes, I'm thankful that our students decided to take some initiative, and they decided to take their own data, and thankfully out of that kind of difficult and challenging time came a variety of initiatives. One of which, for instance, is our communities that coming together of the Asian American community in St. Louis, and you see more networking, you see more reaching out. Another example would be came out of that, we actually decided to outreach more to other minority groups. So the Asian American community in St. Louis, we developed several meaningful community initiatives where we're partnering with various African American community organizations. So those things, I am of Chinese descent. After all, I believe that out of something terrible could grow something positive. So I'm choosing to think about how it's going to lead to a lot of newer and more timely initiatives in our community.
And I said, why isn't it getting more attention? I think that it sort of depends on what you're paying attention to,
Absolutely.
Right? Because funders like the Children's Service Fund have been paying more attention to behavioral health, the behavioral health, the mental, physical, spiritual, all of the health of all different populations, including immigrant populations, really lifting up grassroots organizations. Also, I know Channel 5, one of their reporters has brought a lot of attention to some anti-Asian hate that she had received, and now she has sort of a whole foundation and has been elevating that. So I think that I jokingly said, how come people aren't paying more attention to it? I think some people are, right? It's depending on where you're putting your attention.
Right. There's so much I can respond to, but I wanted to just comment on one thing. I think that the immigrant community in St. Louis is so vibrant. We're so diverse. We're so very active in our own ways, whether it's cultural festivals or community outreach efforts. But there are several areas that are going to be more challenging to the immigrant community leaders, and dealing with mental health challenges, the idea of working with healthcare professionals, therapists, seeing a therapy, and to many immigrant community members, even if they are highly educated, even if they're practicing, they're accountant, they're college professors, it might still be a very difficult concept. That's one thing. So we are trying really hard to actually redefine what's the community norm, right?
Right.
So thankfully, with let's say the CSF grant that you mentioned, we're thankful to be one of the recipients of a grassroots fund to actually build capacity in the Chinese American community. So one of the things that we're doing, for instance, is to develop an online presence, and the online kind of what we call kind of a clearinghouse or a one-stop shop or however you want to call it. But the idea is that we want to, for instance, provide a place where an Asian American, Chinese American parent looking to identify local resources, whether it's non-for-profits like Prevent+Ed, and figure out what kind of training opportunities they might be providing, or look for a therapist who specializes in a specific area,
Absolutely.
But speak their language or practice their faith. So we wanted to get those resources, localized resources, in an easy-to-access location for our community members. It's really, I'm hoping that it will become of use. And I just wanted to plug in that the youth group started being active in 2018. And when I started working with the first group of high school students, one of them told me that they wanted us to have a platform for mental health. And that came specifically because not too long before that, in the Asian American community in St. Louis, there was a pretty prominent is not the right word, pretty impactful. Of course, every loss of life is impactful, but this really led to kind of shockwaves in the community. The suicide of a high school senior in an Asian American community, and they decided to end their life the summer before their college. And this student, I believe, was very active in speech and debate, was very active and academically super strong. And my student leaders continued to kind of not revisit, continue to think. I guess we often talk about what happened to him and what we could now do differently so that we can be better, stronger as a community, whether it's parents or students themselves. And
because there are distinct challenges.
There are distinct challenges
that face Chinese Americans, Asian Americans. There are distinct challenges when it comes to, as you noted, talking about mental health, accessing a therapist, a pressure to perform academically. Like, those are pretty distinct challenges that other communities certainly face, but having mental health professionals and resources available to actually resonate is, I would imagine, pretty powerful. I mean, we've had folks on here who've talked about mental health in the Bosnian community and mental health in the Black community, and there are challenges, and this isn't right. A friend of mine says it's not the oppression Olympics, but like, you have to make sure that you are really resonating with the distinct challenges that particular communities face, and making sure that you have messengers delivering this information that reflect who that have that empathy and that lived experience.
Right. So I wanted to say, absolutely, there are unique, cultural level challenges, and I also speak as a parent. I have a I have a high school student who just started, and with the days before, weeks before, and then within just a few days in high school, I can see how much he's consumed with, of course, new school and all that. But I also observed that among the Chinese American students that I work with, they are absolutely under a lot of pressure in terms of, like you said, academically they must be at the top of their game. They oftentimes tell a joke like, an A is not good enough. You must actually get an A+. I'll give you another example. In St. Louis Chinese community, the modern Chinese school is a very prominent community organization that's in Richmond Heights, and this is where we send our kids to go and take Chinese language classes or do Chinese dances, or there's like 20-some ping pong tables because you can have a ping pong game there. But they offer what I consider to be the most competitive math classes. There are so many competitive math classes that you can take there, that school alone gets more wins in those competitive math competitions than other school districts. That's kind of that gives you a clue about the competitive nature, right?
Right.
So
and it's not bad.
It's not
right.
Yeah, I know. I'm not.
No.
I'm not
it's not bad. It's just like, we have to tap into the fact that this sense of competition, academic performance, excelling, does exist.
Right.
And then how can we
need to give students different ways of defining success. We need to let them see.
And that's where the mental health piece comes in.
Yeah.
And tapping into resources that those students can feel comfortable accessing when they're feeling overwhelmed, when they're having thoughts of suicide, when they're struggling with substance use disorder, or just experimenting.
Right.
And that, to me, is something that the scholars are trying to do with that clearinghouse, and also just saying, like, we're here.
Right.
We're not perfect. We're here, and it's okay to talk about these things.
Right. Yeah. There is such a powerful taboo in a lot of immigrant communities, and Chinese Americans in particular, the parents are oftentimes very afraid of acknowledging the situation, let alone seeking a professional help, for fear that a diagnosis will stay with their child forever. And that oftentimes ends up meaning that their child does not receive the proper, the support that they need. And we, I'll use another specific example as well. Chinese American community, I think, also has an issue with understanding how to help the LGBTQ youth in our community. A lot of them don't know how to do that, and the language still trying to catch up, the cultural norm still needs to catch up. So there are so those are absolutely areas of weakness or potential weaknesses there, or needing of more work.
So how do we, I'll say fix it, but how do we change it? Is that what the scholars are doing?
Absolutely.
Just kind of one conversation
right.
at a time?
Yeah. Our young people I have a high school leader who right now is going into junior year, 11th grade. She started having conversations with me about mental health and how we as a community need to do better about a year and a half ago. And back then, I was already really impressed with how eloquent, how educated these kids were trying to educate themselves on their own. And they're now saying, we want to explore ways where we can help our parents, our grandparents, sort of like catch up. And I just, for me, I see this as a generational kind of divide issue. I oftentimes use the word catch up because I think our youth, oftentimes, especially those who are, paying attention, who are taking the initiative, our youth is ready to take it on. Our youth is ready to engage with mental health professionals. Our youth,
they're fired up.
Yes, and they really are. They really are. And I feel that the moment hopefully is right for our program, but also many other programs in the immigrant community, so that this generation of parents, like people like me with kids,
we can catch up.
Yeah, we can catch up. We can catch up and meet our kids where they need to be met.
I know a lot of people, kind of freak out about the next generation, and they're like, oh,
right.
They don't know how easy they have it, or they're, whatever, or the opposite, and like, oh, the kids are not okay, like they're not all right.
Right.
I am continually impressed by current high schoolers and current college students. I'm also really impressed by younger kids who are very aware and motivated to do something. And so speaking of motivated, when we first started talking off the air, you used the word activist when you described yourself. And I've had other people on the podcast who have sort of shirked away from that word because they don't like what it represents. You seem to kind of embrace it and are maybe sort of seeking to change the definition.
Right. It doesn't have a negative meaning to me. So what community service to me used to be going to host a cultural performance and helping to MC, because I speak English, or translate the, program, blah, blah, blah. I think that's wonderful service.
Yeah.
When I say activist, the word that comes with it means change. I am seeking a specific kind of change. And I call myself an activist because I think I have what it takes to be part of that change. So, that's important. That's, for me, is change. And I also think I have the capacity. So change and capacity. Those are the key words.
Good.
So I think the student that I told you about, we can call her Emily. I think she's an activist. She was almost like not born to be an activist, but she was ready.
She's in her, it's in her veins,
yes,
right?
She wants to create positive change in her community, including the school community, so that we can have more healthy conversations about mental health. That's why she took it upon herself to complete the teen mental health first aid training, which Prevent+Ed offered. And then she helped organize another round, and she's going to try to organize another round. That's an activist. That's, using her talent, using her passion to create change.
And you reached out probably because of Emily and said, we want more teen mental health
We
first
do.
aid training.
Absolutely. Yeah. Emily, I don't know. And we can decide to keep this in or out later. But, recently, unfortunately, in a major school district in St. Louis, we had another death by suicide of a young Asian American youth in our community. And it's devastating. It's I see a lot of parents overtaken by grief because they are really afraid. They're really afraid. They're petrified. I even see conversations about, maybe they're questioning whether they should not have moved their life to America. Maybe there's something about living in America. And to them, I don't know what to say. I don't think it's about living in America per se. I do think that as a community, as parents in particular, I hope that we have some real honest conversations about how they are living as Chinese American, Asian American in this day and age. This day and age in the sense that they just went through 2 years of isolation that was forced upon them, right? And they also did go through the anti-Asian hate, and they probably saw it firsthand or secondhand, and
might still be seeing it.
Might still be seeing it, yes, and that also stays with them. So yes, there's a lot. I don't know how to say it, but there's a lot against them, and I think we as the parents, the community, need to step up. What can we kind of pile on in terms of support and resources so they can be ready to take on the challenge? Instead, I just really hope that we'll be ready for this challenge because.
So if parents are listening or if school personnel are listening and they want to access the clearinghouse that you were mentioning, is there a website that people can go to tap into some of these resources, or is there a social media?
Can I look it up?
Yes, you can look it up.
Okay,
sure.
I should know.
I know. I should know all of our stuff by memory, and I don't.
Right. So you can block that one out. Okay. So
we can edit it and post.
Yes. So the online clearinghouse is it's AAPImentalhealthstl.org. AAPImentalhealthstl.org.
Okay.
And it's still very much a work in progress. We're hoping to include, add some more components, including AAPI student writing on mental health.
Oh,
so we want to see and hear their voice. We also want to have a specific initiative that's dedicated to just about normalizing therapy. In a dream world, I would love every immigrant family who has school-age children to get several hours of free therapy. I think if they've gotten to experience it for free once, they're going to know what therapy is, and they're going to know that it's not that scary at all. Every time it comes up, I tell people how I went to see a therapist myself. I went to see a couple therapy with my husband, and I want to tell everyone that
I know I
it
want
helps
to scream
me.
it from the rooftops, right?
Yes,
I mean, as a white woman with
yeah.
privilege, I still have barriers about accessing mental health, right? And I still, every time I talk to my counselor, I'm like, man, I mean, maybe I don't really need to talk to somebody, or like, do I really need to talk to somebody? And then the second I do, it feels so much better, right?
Yeah.
I can't even fathom being somebody who, and therapy was not discussed in my family ever.
Right.
But I want to shout it from the rooftops, and I want it to be like Oprah, like, you get therapy and you get therapy and you get therapy. Because I feel like everybody should have access to a mental health professional.
Right. The community norm for the Chinese American community, a lot of Asian American community, recent immigrants, is that a lot of that function used to be fulfilled in a very large family setting. You've got a aunt who people listen to. You've got a wise, family elder who everyone listened to. And then maybe it, did solve some of the problems. However, now we're here. Most of us left our extended family in a different country. This is where we are. And a lot of immigrant families needed to recreate that network of support. And I would want to tell all of them, if you can pay $100 an hour to really get dedicated professional support and really sort through some of your problems, it's the best $100 you're ever going to spend as a family.
But funders, if you're listening,
yes,
this would be a really cool funding priority.
Yes. Because a lot of those people are going to think that you only go to therapy if you're completely broken. No, you go to therapy because you don't want to end up completely broken.
It's all about prevention.
Exactly.
It's all about prevention.
Yes,
just
absolutely.
like oil changes. I mean, it's what you do to just keep your car running well.
Yes.
Min, I so appreciated you being here. I was really looking forward to this because I didn't really know what to expect. I know you've been very involved with our organization over the last year or so, and I feel like I've learned so much. So will you come back and tell us maybe in like a year or so the successes that your group is continuing to have?
Wonderful. And I hope that you will hear, if you ever get to feature other Asian organizations, the Very Asian Foundation is a wonderful player in the community. I would love
a virtual introduction. That would be amazing.
Yeah.
All right. If you loved this conversation, if you want more with Min and want to find out more about her, the Asian American Civic Scholars program, please consider rating, reviewing, and subscribing to The Preventable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us at The Preventable, brought to you ad-free by Prevent+Ed. Prevent+Ed works to reduce or prevent the harms of alcohol and other drug use through education, intervention, and advocacy. Please visit their website at prevented.org. Like what you heard? Rate, review, and subscribe to stay up to date with what we are serving on The Preventable.